Welcome, my friends, to a lesson all about graphing. Now, maybe you've tried some different kinds of graphing or even reading graphs before, but this time we're going to talk about bar graphs and pictographs. Before I go any further, let me show you what one of these looks like. Here's one that I just finished. This bar graph shows us, and you can see the title right here, Types of Plants in My Garden. So that's what this graph is showing us, the types of plants that are in a garden. And that's what the original question was for this graph. What types of plants in my garden and how many of each? So you'll notice on this graph, we've got a data table. That's where all the data was collected, the type of plants and the number of each one, and some nice decorations. On this side, the actual bar graph. So two axes. There's a vertical axis that tells you the number of plants. It's labeled with a title of what it's showing, as well as quantity going up the side here. And then on the bottom, it tells us what each plant is. And you can see the bar extends and connects to the number of plants that there are. So you see the plants on this side and the number they are on that side. Together, those two correlate to create these beautiful bars. And maybe you're getting some ideas on how to make yours look beautiful too. This is a bar graph, and it will show us the same thing as this pictograph, which is super easy to read. It has the exact same data on it, but everything is being shown as pictures. It's actually I believe, the same height, but just using pictures in it instead of using a bar. And so you might want to try both of these. Pretty cool, right? But how do you set up one of these? Well, I aim to show you that. What you're going to need is a blank piece of paper, preferably some graph paper. All of that grid on there makes it super easy. You'll also need a ruler and some pencils, and colored pencils can make all the difference. The other thing you need is a question. What are you seeking to measure? What are you seeking to represent visually? I always like to fold these in half so I can make a nice little booklet. And you're always welcome to give it a cover too. If you've taken the line graph lesson, you might have even seen this one right here where it has a nice cover, and when we open it, there's the data table, there's the graph. You can make a pretty nice package with it. So what is our question? I know. What are the ages of my students? That would be really cool to graph. I bet you'd like to see that. So let's write that down. What are the ages of my students? And that's the title too. What are the ages of my students? Well, now I've got to go figure this out. But I have an idea of what kind of ages I'm going to see. And when you're creating your question, you may find at this moment you decide on how many answers is enough. If you say something like, what's your favorite food? You may end up with 10,000 different answers from people, so you may decide to limit it down, depending on what your topic is. What's your favorite food of pizza, burgers, ice cream, chocolate, and candy? I know, those are all pretty unhealthy things, right? But we all have our favorite things that we like to eat. In my case, I know that I have a certain expectation of ages. I know that there's 6-year-olds, and there are 7-year-olds, and 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, and maybe even a 10-year-old in there. So I do want to collect for all of those ages. So I'm going to actually make a table. I'm going to write out age, and I'm going to write out number. And I've left enough space between them because I am actually going to turn this into a table. Line down between those two variables, and a line underneath them. And now we can put in our ages. Let's say 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And now I'm going to come around and ask each of you how old you are and keep track. And I can do that with tallies, and then I can definitely write the final number there. So I'm going to go do that. I'll be back in just a moment, and we'll check in. All right, so I'm back, and I've got my data. As you can see, I had 8 6-year-olds, 7 7-year-olds, 6 8-year-olds, 5 9-year-olds, and 1 10-year-old. So now we're ready to get our graph set up. In most of these graphs, there are 2 axes, and one is going to be vertical and one is going to be horizontal. When you're constructing this, keep in mind how much space you're going to need. If you need to measure up to 200 something, well, this paper might not be tall enough unless you compress your axis down. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe going 2, 4, 6, 8, or 5, 10, 15, and in between those lines are going to be those other numbers that you didn't write down. Also, make sure that your horizontal axis and your vertical axis are a good distance away so that you can label them not only with what it's showing, but also with the title of what it's showing. I'm going to jump up about, well, 4 spaces. And I'm going to start about 3 spaces from the side. I'll drag that right over to there, and then I'll make my next axis. Now, speaking of scaling, if you have a really high number, yeah, you can crunch your numbers down, but what if you have a really low number? What if it's just 2? What if you've measured things and you've only come up with the largest numbers being 2 inches? Well, that could be a very teeny tiny graph, or expand it. Don't forget you have tenths of things. My highest number for age is 10, but these ages are going to be what I put on the bottom axis. The favorite foods you have, the color of your shoes, all of those things will be on the bottom axis or the x-axis. The number of times or the frequency that happened will go up the y-axis, the vertical axis. So I'm going to label this. There's age, and I'm going to pick out 2 spots for each age group. I think that should be pretty good. And I'm going to dot them just so I know where they're going to be. And then I'm going to label them. The age of 6, the age of 7, 8, 9, and 10. And you'll see the spacing on that in just a moment once I get the other axis set up. Let's do number of students on the side, and these relate directly to our title. Okay, and let's number that line. Because I only have 8 students at my max for any of these bars, well, 8 would only be right there. That's super small. I'm going to number by 2s, actually, as in I'm going to skip an extra 1 for every one that I label. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'll go to 9 and 10 just to show that, you will get older. There'll be more of you. Here is what my graph looks like so far. So you can see the number of students on the y-axis, the vertical axis, and the age groups on the bottom axis, the horizontal axis. Now it's time to put those numbers on here. All we have to do is choose that age group, like 6, get the number, it's 8, follow up to where they meet, and it's right there. I'll use my ruler or a straight edge to cap the top of that bar, and then I can fill in the bottom of it right there. And there's my first bar. Check it out, it's pretty tall. Look at all you 6-year-olds. Wow, okay, let's put these other ones in here. We've got in our age group of 7 students, so I'm going to put a bar that goes up to 7. There's a second bar, and now you can already get a good visual distinction. There are definitely less 7-year-olds. You can see it right there, and because I scaled my axis enough, it's a big difference that you can see instead of a teeny tiny difference. All right, moving on. So at this point, I have all the bars finished. The next thing would just to be jazzing this up with some color and some designs, maybe a front cover, maybe a back cover. Maybe I want to make a bigger version, but that's essentially my bar graph right there. Now I could use a pictograph instead, although for this one it might be hard. You 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds don't look that much different, but if you were apples and oranges and pears and things like that, that would work because those pictures would look different. But maybe you can find a creative way to turn this one into a pictograph. Just in case you were looking at what a pictograph looks like again, there's my finished bar graph and the pictograph that correlates. So it's just pictures stacked up to show those quantities. Well, I can't wait to see the bar graphs you create and the topics you choose to explore. Make a poll and ask your family some things. Maybe even ask some of your friends. And I can't wait to see how high those bars climb.